Wow, I love that song. What a perfect and delivery, and thanks for plowing the field. That's what we do when we praise and worship. We have to have our field plowed. That's not exactly like having your clock cleaned, but just comes to me. Those of you who are in the upper room, there are some seats in here today. So, I see 5, 6, 7. So if you want to fight among you, or rock, paper, scissors, whatever you need to do. But I see at least 5 along the way. That 6, 7, 8, 9, something like that. Unless there are people sitting there that I don't see. That's always a possibility. We are looking for supernatural things, so we don't know what God's up to. But how'd you sleep? Sleep well? I did too. I slept well as well. As well. I'm just trying to. It's like tuning your guitar when you're trying to get all your stuff together. When you're a musician, you just have to talk while you get it set up. And you don't really say anything. You're just trying to appear, relating to you. So, engaged. That's the word I'm looking for, to appear engaged. But, wow, God's just been continuing to move my heart toward really encouraging us to not lose sight in any moment of what God wants, of His intent. If you think about it, sometimes we hear things and we don't work out the words. But if I hear the word intent, well, what does that bring up in you? If I say the word intent, is that different than having no purpose? Or I know it's early, but come on. Okay, this is a participatory group. Every now and again, you need to do this just so I know you're there. Like a little dog in the back of the car, just, yeah. It really helps, a speaker. That's why I like the lights up. Anyway, so to be intentional, we are focused on something. And now, as humans, we cannot be focused every moment. I have been accused of never being focused. And I am in my own way. God made my brain the way He made it. I didn't, check off a box before I went down the chute and said, I'd like to be ADD. I would like to only think like 2% of the population. I would like to be an introvert that you make to be an extrovert. I didn't do that. We come here with what He gives us, and there's just such focus on your being who all you're supposed to be, and what I'm learning is I'm to be who I am, so I can join with you, so we can be who we're supposed to be together. And we just fight so much, we don't want to be together. It's just so hard to get along with Christians. You know what I'm saying? It just really is. There's no cussing, no drinking, no nothing. It's just like, or we say those things. Don't do that. Or some denominations say that. Of course, I did a Lutheran conference. Let me tell you, that was a swinging conference. After the first session, they invited me up to the party room. And I was met with, the 79-year-old lady who asked what I'd like to drink, and there was wine. I don't think there was any hard liquor, but some of those bottles are pretty, whatever they are. I don't know what was over there, but it was just like they were just relaxed. It was great. And I thought, sometimes at women's conferences, if they have an open bar after the first session or before, it might help. I don't know. I mean, we're just so worried about, how we're going to do or what God's going to think. And he's like, he already knows you. He already knows what you think. He already knows where you are. And he's already said, I love you, baby. I'm working you toward the end. Quit looking at your tennis shoes so much. Go forward. Try to paint, try to sing, try to dance. Did y'all see that movie with Meryl Streep that just came out, the lady who couldn't sing? I don't remember the name of it. What was it? Florence. Somebody? Oh, I love that movie. My sister and I laughed through the whole thing. We're both singers, and it was just excruciating in some scenes. But that woman was... I mean, it was just, she just thought she could sing. I mean, and she booked Carnegie Hall. She was at Carnegie Hall. And they invited people free, the sailors and everybody. And they started jeering her. And this woman who'd been really ugly, the first time she'd ever seen, she fell on the floor laughing and crawled out of the auditorium. She was of a different class than Florence, and probably more like my people. And she wound up being her defender. She stood up and said, "Hey, everybody, quick, and they all sat down and started, really enjoying the woman and what she was doing and what he was doing for her and what she thought she was doing for them. It wasn't that she really couldn't sing that well. And I believe in the Christian community, we have gotten so focused on perfection and everything sliding right in the slot and it all working this way and that way. And I just have to be honest with you, nothing else in my life works that way. I'm sliding into the rocks all the time. And always I have to know God is sovereign, and I don't have to, all the time go, why'd you let that happen? I have a little girl who lives next door, and she loves to come over and pick up stuff. She just, she's 8 years old, and I understand that. But, there's some things I say, no, that's a fountain pen, okay? It's a fountain pen that you put into ink, and you draw up the ink into the, the cavity there, and you don't want to play with that, okay? I said it very clearly. And I have watercolors. I have Play-Doh for her. I have, stuff that she can do, colors she can draw, and so she'll come over and we'll have a couple of cookies, and sometimes she has more. She just crams the whole thing in her mouth. I'm like, I will give you cookies. You can eat it a bite at a time. I won't tell your mom, mom's a word with Miss Doc Rose, and so she had been drawing something, and before I had a chance to get across the room, she took that pen and took the top off and thought, how do you get this to work? And turned it. No, she didn't take the top off. She turned it, which released the ink into the cap. Well, I didn't see how much she turned it. I just saw that she had an end of, hold of that end. And I went over there and I'm like, baby, don't touch that. I had 15,000 things she could touch. You know what I'm saying? She had a choice. And she chose the fountain pen. The one that I had said, don't eat of that tree. You will not die, some voice said to her. It won't matter. So this was the funniest thing. She was finishing up and I said, well, she wanted to write with it. So I didn't realize how much ink was in the cap. So when I unscrewed it and turned to give her the pen, all that ink went all over her. And she said, you threw ink on me. Very accusatory. You threw ink on me. My mom's going to be so mad that you got my clothes with all this stuff on it. I was laughing. I was like, I told you not to use the fountain pen. I didn't know the ink was in the cap. And I thought, lessons are hard. Now, she'll tell that story in 20 years, and it'll still be that Miss Roseanne threw that ink on her. Now, you think back in your memory of things that may have happened to you that you blame. You continue to blame. And maybe blame God or point the finger or why in the world or what in the Sam Hill, as they say down in my neck of the woods. Had somebody come from Alabama. Where are you? Sue, right? There you are, sweetheart. It's interesting. I'll save that for just a moment. So wave at me again if I hadn't said anything about you. But, you know, you blame and you point fingers and you stay right there. You don't move on. And it takes up residence inside of you. And it begins to do a little something to you. Because God says, don't let any root get in there and get you. Okay? And so when we were talking last night about dwelling in the land and cultivating faithfulness, when you cultivate, you turn up roots. It rips that stuff up. If you've ever been at a place where they deeply plow a field, that dirt is with that bottom plow, it's curved over like this as it goes along. And if you fall in the furrow, you could break your ankle. Sometimes it's this deep, if they go deep. Trying to get down to the subsoil, trying to get down to where you're turning that stuff over. And then they come back with a cultivator, and it chops up all that. So by the time that they're finished and gone over it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, it may take a long time depending on your dirt and how much clay or whatever's in there. By then, you can pick it up, and you don't want it too fine. If it's too fine, then your plants are going to die because there won't be enough air in between each particle of dirt for the roots to live. See, it's a fine science, but if we don't know anything about it, we're just like, you plow the field, you put the fat, you eat the tomato. You know, the process is unknown to us. And you might have read about it and had knowledge, but real wisdom only comes as when you've lived it. I think I'll write that down. Lots of people are praying for our time together. All over the country, all over, asking the Lord to come. So you are here out of God's plan. And my encouragement to you, if you hate my guts, try to get over that and just see if there's anything you hear that might ring a bell. Because some of you, I'm not your brand of speaker. I understand that. Only 2% of the population think like I do. So there are 98% of people who don't have a clue what I'm doing. I understand that. It's hard. But there's something about when we get together and there's a familiarity with someone who suffered. You can always tell if someone suffered and they know you're suffering. There's something in their eyes that say, I know what you're going through. They don't go just pick up your purse and go home. Go get on with yourself. You know, there's just, you're just like, thank you. You know, you have to live it out. And then if you have to say, I'm sorry, if you have to apologize, we need to live where we are. You can only be where you are, not where you'll hope you'll be. And that's where you start. In my dirt, I had stones, still do. I mean, they come up from the winter. I think I've gotten every stone out of there, and they just grow like plants. And the freezing pushes them up to the surface, and I get out there, and I'm doing stones all over again. I can't believe there's another stone out there. Why? Because that's how it works. You can't throw yourself against that. You have to say, I'm in with you, God. I'm here with you. And he said, I got a new toy. See if I know how to use it. Oh, it's not going on here. Shoot first, see? It's a laser. But it doesn't work on that. Isn't that funny? The very thing. When I was reading this morning in Streams in the Desert, Volume 1, it's what my spiritual mom, Miss Helen Wright, read every day. And not the only thing. But I'd never heard of it. And when I met her back in Birmingham, I signed up to take piano from her because I just never met anybody like her. I mean, she was just there was something about her that drew me to her. It's kind of like when Sue came up to me last night and said, "Where were you born?" And I said, "Alabama." And she said, "Me too." She heard something in my voice. Now, all of you go, "Well, it's obvious, isn't it?" No. Different Southern accents, just like yours. You can tell the ground they came out of. And there are certain accents in Alabama. And there's a certain something you go, "You're familiar. That rings something in me that reminds me to remember." And so we are spiritual beings, and when we get the truth, it rings within us. And this is something that I put on the app that you can download from Cannon Beach. It's not something that they ran off for you, but if you get the app, you're going to get this particular reading. And the scripture is from 1 Samuel 3:18, and we're just going to go with it. We may never get to Daniel, but I think we will. But I think there's something here God's working out. There's a stone God's working out here that I think that if we get it out, we're going to plow. We're going to go. We're going to plant. And we're going to harvest, okay? And it's 1 Samuel 3:18 says, "It is the Lord, let him do what seems good to him." And that was David when that fellow was throwing clods at him and talking against him. And his guys wanted to kill the fella. And David's response was, "It's the Lord." He didn't go, "That's that crazy guy who's talking against me." He said, "This is from God. Let him do what he thinks is right." Gosh, I'm a long way in some respects. I'm easily offended. How about you? Or your mother-in-law? And this is what Hannah Whittle Smith said. And what Miss Kalman did is she took different things out of her own journal that she had recorded, like Miss Helen did. I have 100 of Miss Helen's journals that she wrote daily things. And it says, "See God in everything." I'd write that down if I were you, if you don't know it. See God in everything. And God will calm and color all that you see. It may be the circumstances of our sorrows will not be removed. Their condition will remain unchanged. But if Christ, as Lord and Master of our life, is brought into our grief and gloom, he will encompass us about with songs of deliverance. To see him and be sure that his wisdom cannot err. His power cannot fail. His love can never change. To know that even his direst dealings with us are for our deepest spiritual gain is to be able to say, in the midst of bereavement, sorrow, pain, and loss, the Lord gave and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Now, Hannah doesn't say, let's all get here and have a big party. Although I've had a friend who lost a job and she gave a give thanks and all thing party. And within 2 weeks she had a job. I mean, I'm not saying it was correlated, but there was something about her saying, I've lost my job, so I'm going to give a give thanks and all things party. Will y'all come? There's something about that draws me, that rings true, that I go, okay, I want to be a person like that instead of, I hate those people down at that job. Come with me. Let's go blow up a car. Let's, That may not be friends like yours. I might could use this to find my place on my page. Let's see. Yeah, but it's distracting. It's that ADD thing. Something else happens when I turn it on. Nothing else but seeing God in everything will make us loving and patient with those who annoy and trouble us. I mean, God showed me if folks were annoying me, it wasn't that person's problem, it was mine. Because I can't change that person. Am I going to let that person dictate everything I do in my life because she aggravates me? Am I going to let her steal my peace? And you say, well, I live with him. What am I going to do? Well, that is a problem. And it's really not funny when you're having to go through situations that cut you like a knife every day. How do we seek the Lord in the midst of that? That's what's different about Christianity, is that He doesn't fix all your boo-boos. He holds you in your boo-boos. He says it will be for something. And if we don't know that, if we don't have people who go on before us and say, come on, girls, it's getting better and better, then we don't have the will to do that. We're just all stuck in that mud pile saying, I can't believe God did this. I mean, he took my mama. My mama died. And if there were anybody who should have lived, it was my mother. When people came to the funeral, my sister and I said to each other, he should have took her. I mean, really? I mean, don't you do that? You go, what? Mama gone? She's still here. Oh, my gosh. There's no understanding. I mean, there's just no understanding. And you say, what is the truth? The truth is one thing, but when it starts going down inside of you, it becomes wisdom. And wisdom begins to ease you. Because there's something inside of you that says, you're not going to die. When we were young, when we had problems, we all were going to die. We're going to die, we're going to die. And as we get older, I get to say to people, you're not going to die. You might wish you had. But you will get through this. Why? Because I'm not the big kahuna. I just know He's done it for me. I may not have huge things that I can point to, but there are enough little ones that I can say, it's true. I don't know how. I don't know why. Because I wouldn't help me. You know what I'm saying? I would say, you just need to learn. Those people who annoy us, they will be to us then only instruments for accomplishing His tender and wise purposes toward us. And we shall even find ourselves at last inwardly thanking them for the blessing they bring us. Nothing else will completely put an end to all the murmuring or rebelling thoughts that we have. Hannah Whittle Smith, today's reading of Streams in the Desert. We've got to see God in all things. And as we begin to be pushed to the margin of the world, as the church is, we begin to see that God's way is different. And it will not make sense to you, and it will not make sense to them. But that's not my job for it to make sense. I don't make sense to myself. There are things that I don't understand. But there are things when you hear it and you go for it and you move, and God sees that your heart is there. Don't you do that with your kids? I heard a story. Ann Kimmel, gone on to be with the Lord Jesus, but she told this story, and she said there was a little girl who was with her granddaddy, and she wanted to get him wanted just to serve him. And she said, Granddaddy, is there anything I can do for you? And he said, no, baby, there's nothing. Granddaddy doesn't need anything. And she said, well, Granddaddy, would you like something to eat? He said, no, baby, Granddaddy don't want anything to eat. And she kept trying things. And finally she said, Granddaddy, would you like a glass of water? And finally he said, yes, baby. Granddaddy will like a glass of water. So she went into the kitchen, got a dirty glass instead of a clean, turned on the hot instead of the cold. As she filled up the glass, her little muddy finger was in the water, and so the water was all muddy. And when she comes back to Granddaddy, she says, here, Granddaddy, here's your water. And he took it and he drank every drop, and he said, sweetheart, that's the best glass of water Granddaddy's ever had. Did it have anything to do with the water? That's the Lord. I want to be like Jesus. And He's promised me, He's making me into His image every day that I wake up on this side of the dirt. So let's go ahead and go to today's, since we have 2 minutes to finish. I think I can do it. Yeah, I'll just hang on. We're talking about pressure. A lot of times people in this generation will say that, they're being persecuted. But persecution needs to really reside with people who are dying for their faith. And we have you're from the Middle East and Middle China, Middle East, Asia. There we go. I knew it was one of those big things. Asia. But when you get out of the country, you begin to see a difference. I mean, in that same Sudanese conference that I went to, the men were in another room, and what they did was that they showed their teachers where they had been mutilated by the Muslims because of their faith, because they wouldn't deny Christ. We're talking mutilated, sexually mutilated, beaten, and yet here they are in their conference, their white shirts or ties, and saying, "It is for the Lord." I said, I want to be more like you, Jesus. And I'll be like my brothers and sisters who stress out. Yeah. But it's because they're going to be killed or don't have enough food or their babies are dying. And I stress out because they ran out of Dr. Pepper at the fountain. You know, it just ruins your day. You know, think about things in your life that just kind of tip you over the edge. You might go along all day long. It's kind of like as a teacher. You go all day long and all your periods, you're okay. 6th period comes in and you've taken it and taken it and taken it and taken it. And one kid just says something and you just eat that kid's lunch. And I had to apologize many times to kids. It embarrassed them. But I had to say, you know, I belong to Jesus. And what I did was just wrong. Will you forgive me? Like, how do you respond to pressure? Okay, I brought up my clicker in a cup, so I wouldn't touch it. But I want to encourage you. Harding Trading Company is right around the corner from us. It's a coffee shop. They have soups and stuff like that. But Victor and his wife own it. And I think it's their coffee that you serve in the carriage house, his blend of coffee. But tell Victor I said, hey, if you go there and get something to eat, we had a great time talking. We may be on different places in some things. He's from Ireland, but we have great conversations. And I saw him yesterday, and he remembered me. It was kind of funny. But it was like when my sister and I went back to Ireland, and we got into a taxi, and Sherry told him where to go, and he said, "Are you the sisters from Alabama?" He remembered us from when we had come before. How do you respond to pressure? Is this what you look like? Just taking a nap, no problem, everything's cool. You know, are you peaceful as a sunset? I walked out my front door one night, and that's what I saw. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? I mean, that's just really cool. Are you like this? When someone is giving you attitude and they don't know you're crazy. The Help, you remember that movie? Do you know someone like this? Warning, death from the ankles down. Look at those dogs. They're mean, man. They get you. We're going to kill your ankle. Come on in. Do you have pressure from helping others? It says when you can't afford the delivery fee, but you got a car and your buddy has a dolly. I can see some of our guys doing it. I got it, man. We can get this. We can get this home. Okay, you have a little Facebook mistake. What you put on there? I promise you, when I left Nashville, I was sitting by a couple, and this girl was gorgeous. She sat by me. But I promise you, I bet she took 25 selfies of herself sitting there. I mean, I almost wanted to go, is that just for you? Or, I mean, I really was just inquisitive, you know, just like, you know, we all want to look like this, right? Do you have money pressures? Is this your current financial status? When you bring all your money together and there's just chocolate in the middle. And how about menopausability? It says, in loving memory of sleep, so suddenly taken from us by menopause. You know, things start happening to you, don't you, when they get older, and you just can't control it. You wake up, something's falling, and it can't get up. And you're like, I don't know what to do. You younger folks, you just kind of chuckling right now, but I'm telling you the gospel truth. Kids, yours, theirs are aliens. And then they said, don't make a mess. See kids talking to each other. Well, I want to go to Daniel this morning. And in Daniel chapter 1, you see that if you know the story of Daniel, some of you, this may be a new story, which I love folks who haven't heard the Bible stories. They're just wonderful. It's great to read the stories in the Bible. But when we look at Daniel, it's so easy to read the story, especially if you've heard it all your life. It really loses its sting. It loses its momentum. It loses its immediacy that this really happened to all of God's people. And that God was trying to teach them a lesson as he allowed Babylon to take them into captivity. Now, apply what we've been saying all morning long to this situation. That God allowed his people to be taken into captivity so that his word would be fulfilled and they would learn that they don't live on their own. They must trust him. And so the Babylonians came in and they took some of the greatest kids that they found there, and they were great in every. It says in verse 4. We didn't put that one there. I love it. I picked one I didn't write down. But it says, find the youths in whom there was no defect, who were good looking, showing intelligence in every branch of wisdom, endowed with understanding and discerning knowledge, and who had the ability for serving in the king's court. And he ordered him to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. Now, this was the top-notch kids. I don't know many teenagers who have all those qualities. I mean, those are whatever, cream of the crop, the kids who just were amazing. Now, let's not forget how they had been raised. That's one of the reasons these Jewish kids were this way. It was because of what they had learned, of what had been poured into them. Even though God's people were sinful, their parents had poured into them what was good, and they began to be the result. Yes, they had the qualities to begin with, because you have to have dirt before you can put stuff in it. But what you put in it to amend it, and sometimes that's manure that has taken a couple of years to quit being manure and turned into compost. I mean, that's the thing. I've learned a lot about manure. Manure happens on the farm. And you take manure and you don't put it just straight onto the plants, because it will kill them. It stinks. It's awful. But you put it to the side and you add other things to it. And in a couple of years, it becomes gold to your soil. God does that with our manure. He says, right now, it's stinky. It's bad what you did. But we're going to take it to the side and we're going to continue to add things to it from life and from me. And one day it will be the very thing that strengthens your roots, and you will feed others with the produce that comes from the very thing you thought would destroy you. Let that sink in for a second. And so we have here in our time, unsettles time. We have to learn how God works in his own timing, and he never abandons us. He never leaves us. And we have to stand on those truths. He is faithful. He's always been faithful, and he will always be faithful. But if you don't think he's faithful, if you've not seen the evidence in anyone's life that he is faithful, then you start saying to God, I need to see that you're faithful. It doesn't bother him that you go to him and people say, well, I don't go to God. I get mad and I go somewhere else. No, you need to march right up to the throne, Shirley Temple it right up to the throne, with a little crinoline, Hey, and you will learn as you grow that is not the best approach, but he does not push you away. He knows where you are. Like my friend's little girl taking her face and turning it. When we're children, we act like children. And it's the same spiritually. And we as older sisters need to understand that with our younger kids, our younger walkers in the Lord. We need not say, oh, you ought not be in doing that. We need to be praying for their hearts to grow and strengthen, because I'll just bet you money God's got a plan to grow up that little heart to be like him. But if you don't go through the suffering, it's just words. It's just, oh, you ought to do this. Oh, you'd be like this. Oh, you ought to wear your hair like this. Oh, you ought to, it doesn't matter, because when it's all over, guess what? You can't do your own hair when you die. However you look when you are in the coffin, someone else has done it for you. So if you're so meticulous that nobody else touches you, you just wait. It's true. I'm not trying to be funny, but I'm just saying there's something about that when all is said and done. I think I'm going to write something. So, now, sometimes how I respond to things in my life, some people might think that, God has had to call a meeting of the Trinity and get together and say, what are we going to do about Roseanne's life, man? This is this holy huddle time. Let's just, she's brought something to us and we had no idea was going to happen. What's going on? No, that's just silly. It's just silly. If he already knows when I'm going to take my last breath, do you think he doesn't know what's going on right here? When you're crushed or hurt or can't breathe or people die or your money goes away, your job goes away, you don't have any idea what you're going to do. People tell you that you're a failure. People tell you you're not spiritual. People tell you whatever they tell you. When it's all said and done, when you close your eyes, it's God who's still inside there with you. So a lot of times I just close my eyes. I had a little friend, he was 2. When he got tired of his mama and what she was saying, he'd just close his eyes. You couldn't get him to open them. He'd just sit there. We've got Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now, that's not how we know these last guys, because they get other names. They get renamed, And in Daniel 8, it said, but Daniel made up his mind. That sounds southern to me. I have made up my mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food. You can read this for himself. And so what he did was, he sought permission from the commander that he wouldn't do that. And so he went and he said, please test us for 10 days and see if we're better than that. And look what verse 9 says. Now God granted Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the commander of the officials. I find so often in my life and others, we're afraid to go talk to people. We're afraid to buck the system. We're just afraid to say anything because of what might happen to us. But what he did was he went in subservience. He went in humility. He went and he said, please allow us this just for 10 days. And then instead of stomping his foot when the man didn't immediately say yes, because the guy said, if y'all don't do well, I'm going to die. I mean, this is not something where you just lose your job. You're going to get your head cut off. So he said, but then at the end of the 10 days, they looked better than all the other folks. And so what's interesting is that what they did was they decided to institute Daniel's way of eating for everyone in that program. Because if it worked for them, their common human mind said, well, it should work for the whole crew, for the king, and he will be happy that they look this good. And it said, and as for these 4 youths, who gave them knowledge, intelligence in every branch of literature? See, it just doesn't say he could work on a car. In literature and wisdom. And Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams. Who gave it to him? God. And it wasn't because necessarily that they just had the courage and they went and asked. God had a plan and he gave them the ability. He put something inside of Daniel's heart that said, buddy, you got to go talk to the guy. You can't defile yourself with this. And so he went. And see, we're in a time that what we have to say is, this is God's response The king looked at him and said, man, there's nobody better than they are. How are we as Christians showing the world? We do a lot of talking about how we don't want to do things other people's ways, but are we showing that we are better in appearance or compassion or kindness or the fruits of the Spirit, self-control, in our service and how we deal with people who we don't know? Are we ugly to people on the road? It's amazing when you see people coming out of church. They've just had a sermon, and everybody's trying to get out, and they'll almost run over the policeman or other people, and it's just like they're finished. It's like, I don't think they got the sermon. They ought to have a group going, okay, over to the side, you get remedial sermon back here. This time you're taking notes. And see, it said, and the king talked with them, and they said they didn't find anybody like that. He found them 10 times better than all the ones. Now, I don't know about you, but if I were thrust into a kingdom that had magicians and conjurers as like normal, we're talking black arts here. We're talking, stuff happens. It's not just something out of Harry Potter. We're talking the evil side, that things happen. And that's where they found him. And he could really be going, I don't want to be here. I belong to God. And he did in his heart, but he was working with the people. And it's interesting that we see from Daniel what we wrote down last night. Our practices form us. Our practices form us. And you were talking about muscle memory. Mine don't remember very much. But it's when you work those muscles, if you've ever had to rehab from anything, it's difficult, it's painful, but what they're trying to do is to get those muscles to begin to remember this is how you work and get the electricity going in them. And if you don't, you can't. And you think at this time in your life, oh, that'll never happen to me. It might. And the second chapter, we have the king's dream. And we really don't have time. We'll finish up the Daniel tonight. But we have the king's dream. And what I wanted to say is that God knows what you need in your position. And if you're going to have to interpret dreams, you just get prepared that you're going to be able to have that knowledge. Because when Daniel found out that the king had told everyone and the magicians and said, I'm not just going to tell you to interpret my dream. I'm going to ask you to tell me my dream and then interpret it. So they couldn't do the cliff notes of that particular dream. They had to really know what he had dreamed. And when Daniel heard that, and we'll look at this particular scripture tonight, he goes and he goes, when they come to kill Daniel and his friends, he asks the same commander, let me have an audience with the king. Well, that's pretty bold. He could go to the king and the king could just say, oh, you're supposed to be dead. Kill him. Not even let him talk. And he goes in there and he says, give us some time. And he goes back home and he gets his buddies. And he says, let's pray for God to have compassion on us, that we would know what this means. See, so often when you have, I'm not saying anything about the building projects, but I'm sorry that you don't have 100 people in here every day praying for God to raise up that building. In churches, we have programs we want to do or things that we want to see happen. And so we have committee meetings or we take up offerings. But instead, we need to call the church to prayer. In my church in Franklin, the Church of the City, Franklin campus, they've just started every Tuesday night. We're just praying together, praying for the churches in the area. Because we've been talking about prayer, but sometimes it's easy to talk about prayer and write stuff down about prayer, but you never pray because, that's a private thing. But see, Daniel's in this position, and he has been taught, his practices form him. He knows this is the only way to survive. You and I are in this position right now. We're going to see some statistics that I think I have. Can I have just 30 more seconds, you think? Is that all right? and I think it's on your handout that you got. It says they took a survey, the Barna group did, and they asked people, and it's a really large number, and they didn't give me the number of how many they surveyed, but 93% said that you're going to be a religious extremist if you use religion to justify violence. I agree with that. Okay, and he said, I don't know where the other 7% are. Like what 7% thought it was okay to use religion to justify violence, but that kind of shows how important the sample was, because there were 7% of the people who thought you could do that. Does that make sense? Now, Americans nowadays, in the last 3 years, they say you're being a religious extremist when you try to convert others. 60% of the people said that you're a religious extremist if you try to convert other people. Share your faith. Talk to them about Jesus. This man said that a friend of his was on the plane, and he had a great conversation about faith and stuff with a man next to him. 60% of people in America today would find that extremist behavior. 52% say you're a religious extremist if you believe that same-sex marriage relationships are morally wrong. This is a hot-button topic in the church today, and there's a lot of judgment, a lot of stuff going on. But in the world, they say if you take a stand on that, you think that's what God says. There are 52% of people. That's over 50% of people in America think you're not just out there. They think you're a religious extremist. They only usually use that word when they talked about terrorism. And then 42% say that if you quit a good job to pursue missions, you're a religious extremist. Now, let me just say one word about being a religious extremist. We are. There's no two ways about it. But we don't have to act in a haughty manner, or as if, someone died and left us in charge, because Jesus didn't die and leave us in charge. He died, he rose, he's in charge. And then we are able to seek him about what he wants us to do and seek his face, that he will provide for us what we need. And then it's his responsibility as he does that through us, and we walk courageously in faith forward in what we feel like God has called us to do. Do we always hear correctly? No, we never get it 100% right. But we're trying. We're trying to walk forward. We have to say, I'm sorry, I thought I heard God, but I didn't. Sometimes it takes 10 years, and then I go, I did hear God correctly. It just seemed really nuts at the time. Some of you know what I'm talking about if you've walked long enough. So as we spend this afternoon in time together, and I could just imagine y'all going to that place that has the boardwalks near the water. That ocean looks really good. I can't believe you would do that. It's like, oh my gosh, why would you go there? You get blown. I can just see y'all's little Cannon Beach sweatshirts just, boom, 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 being turned around. If that's what you want to do, take some time in there to think back over what we've said and say, if you put your name in Daniel's place in this passage, what would the story read like? Am I supposed to pray? You supposed to pray? Y'all supposed to sing? No, you go. I'm finished. Go ahead.